call the curriculum meeting to order. I apologize for starting a few minutes late. We just came from a lovely retirement and years of service recognition program, so that was really wonderful, recognizing people with 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 years of service, as well as those retiring. So that's very nice. So there might be some more people coming in who are still down there. I also wanted to say, right, if you haven't seen, there's an announcement on the district website about the new superintendent. So, all right, first item on the agenda is public comment, and the Pennridge School Board welcomes public comment. According to policy 903, we remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than to individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. A speaker may speak once during each comment period. Please note that these sessions are designated for comments. To protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community, the board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals, such as students or district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrators or board members, or to communicate with the board and superintendent privately by sending an email to psdschoolboard@pennridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time. So is there any public comment? So if you like, you come up and state your name and municipality.
Is there a button I need to?
Yep, there's a... Yeah, there you go.
Chrisanne Swartley from Hilltown Township. When I looked at the agenda for this evening, I was surprised that the social studies curriculum was not on the agenda, given what happened at the April 23rd meeting. There seemed to be two concerns from what I could tell, something about the process, but also something about the content. And it seemed to me as I watched and rewatched the video of the school board meeting that the reasons for the content concerns were not articulated in a way that the teachers could move forward, find a way to move forward so that they could have a new social studies curriculum for the 7th grade. And my hope would be that at some point they would be articulated, because the professionals tasked with teaching effectively can't do their job effectively if they don't know why something didn't pass that they needed to have passed. So I wondered if there was a plan for communicating specific concerns about the content and when they would be communicated, and if there was a way to move forward. I was just surprised. I was really surprised when I saw it wasn't on the agenda tonight.
Thank you for your comment. I'll wait if, I'm going to wait until everybody who wants to make public comment comes up, and then I can, if I can, I will answer some of the questions. So, is there any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Jackie Fruta from Dublin Borough. I also just wanted to address something from that last meeting. I was not at the last curriculum meeting, and I don't think the minutes are posted yet. So I wasn't sure exactly what the discussion was, and what concerns may have been addressed at that meeting. And while I understand that board members aren't required to explain their vote, I did appreciate that a board member did share or was willing to comment on her concerns. However, I have to say I found that explanation troubling. And I guess I know there have been some public comments from community members who suggest that there's always like a rubber stamp on whatever the administration wants. But I guess I don't look at it that way. I always was told that these committee meetings are where concerns are to be addressed, where discussion takes place. And it seemed to me that there was a number of people who regularly attend those meetings were quite surprised by the failure for that motion to pass. So again, not having the meetings and not having been at the meeting, I'm not sure exactly what concerns were expressed. But I do believe that board members who regularly vote along with the administrators are doing so because they recognize recognize and respect the expertise of those administrators. And I also believe that frequently, if they have concerns, those concerns are addressed before the vote takes place. I absolutely believe that the board should question at any time any expense, ask for a justification of the expense, ask for, to maybe talk about changing our materials and whatnot if what we have is ineffective. But, and maybe part of that discussion was around that. However, I was very concerned that, and I think some of the other community members might be concerned, if board members are voting based on their preference. And that seemed to be the explanation that we got, was a preference. And I would question what qualifications some of any of the board members, any of you, don't have the same expertise as your director of curriculum and the social studies supervisor. So I would hope that we are listening to those folks and our votes are based on that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Bill Brocious in Sellersville. I've been hearing from a lot of people in the community who are upset and maybe not understanding what happened in the reorganization that occurred 2 weeks ago with the board. It seems a political thing, a partisan thing. Maybe that's just appearance, I hope so. And as far as the textbook goes, I hope we're not trying, no one is trying to impose an ideological test on textbooks, especially social studies textbooks. I don't know the textbook in question, I haven't seen it, but I hope that that's not the case. And if this is the case, I think you will get some pushback from people in the community if the board becomes partisan, politically partisan, and if there is an ideological test for textbooks and other things that happen at Pennridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening. Keith Laverca, Social Studies Supervisor. I just want to take a few moments to speak about what happened at the last board meeting regarding the textbook approval. First of all, I want to apologize to the school board for my conduct during that meeting. I do realize that that was out of order and that was the inappropriate time to speak about it. I don't want my conduct to be a distraction to the real issue here, and so I sincerely apologize for that conduct. I've been in education for 20 years, 16 of those in Pennridge, 12 of those as a social studies supervisor, and I've been in front of many board members before, and I've asked for many proposals from board members, and I know many of you for a long time that we've worked together. I would hope that we could work together as we move forward as a partner in this process versus not understanding exactly why we're making the decisions that we are. I can honestly say that that was my first time that I've been shocked and surprised by a vote during a board meeting. Yesterday was a very important anniversary for me. My brother David was killed in Iraq on May 6, 2006. And actually my interview for this position was postponed because we were burying him at Arlington National Cemetery. I take my job very seriously. There's a personal connection to it, and there's a constant need for striving to find the best resources for our students, the best tools for our students. And I take that job very seriously, and I will continue to do what is needed in the best interest of the students. And again, I hope that we can work together because, as we all know, we are all here for the benefit of the students. That is our mission, and that is what we should continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening, Lee Rush, Percy. Thank you, Keith, for those words. I used to teach social studies too a long time ago in a private school. I love the subject. I love history. I won't bore you about my history here in Pennridge again. I actually went to take a look at the book this week. It looks like only 2 people came out to look at the book. I had asked earlier, I'd like to look at the book. I think it's a good thing to, if I'm going to speak about a subject, to know a little bit about that subject. I've only got up to like a couple hundred pages. It's got like over 800 or 900. There's no way I could read it all. I have really no idea. I have a thought, I have opinions. They're usually worth about 2 cents. But I do believe that there's something at play that's really important in our community. As I said last time when I spoke, there's nothing wrong with power. It's how we live, it's how we work, how we influence people. But I want to echo some of the thoughts said earlier, that trust is, to me, one of the most essential ingredients in a healthy organization. And that takes time. It takes time to build, it takes time to meet people and sit down with them and talk to them and ask them questions about who they are, what their thinking is, what their motivation is. And I said I try to do that, and I'm going to continue to do it, to try to understand where people come from. But I think power and trust is really at the central nexus of this issue right now. And it's going to take some time for everything to settle down. There's a new superintendent, I understand, which is, another new beginning. But when books become a subject about if they will or won't be approved, to me it's a really big issue. And whether it's procedural or ideological, time will tell. But I do think that this is a really important decision as we go through. And I guess the process, someone will speak to it after this meeting about the next step in this process, about vetting books for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
Sue Furlong, West Raquel Township. I respect the fact that the board, the majority of the board, I might add, decided to take time. The previous textbook was kept for 10 years, so assuming that this one may be kept just as long, it's a 10-year decision. So I would rather have somebody take an extra month or an extra meeting, whatever it takes, to make sure that it's a good book if it's going to be used for 10 years, rather than rush into it just to keep the peace. I went back and I looked at a couple of videos and for this meeting, curriculum, and there was a complaint by more than one board member, especially, interestingly, some of the older board members, in that they used to see the book. It was brought to the board members at the committee meeting so that they could look at the book, and this wasn't being done. So the board members were at committee having a book reviewed to them, and they could not see this book, handle the book, even tell you what it looked like. Ms. Miller, you were one of them that made that remark. And I think it was a valid point that if you're going to propose a book, bring the book. Let me look at it before I have to make a 10-year decision. And if the board does not have the right to reject a book for whatever reason, and they have to take it because somebody, with expertise recommended it, why do we need a board?
I would just like to respond. I know I'm out of order.
Wait, yeah, can we wait till?
Okay, I was just going to say that book was available March 23rd.
Yeah, I just want to
I
wait
know,
until
but
we're
I'm just
finished
saying, at the
public
meeting,
comment,
it was
and
not
then
there.
we can respond to everything. Is there any other public comment? Anyone else? All right, so we will have public comment again at the end. Just a couple of things, since the process was brought up, and then there were questions about what's happening going forward. So I'll just speak to that, and if anybody wants to add to that, any other board members, they can, or Dr. Scheid. The proposal, it's actually, the social studies proposal is 2 books. One, textbooks and a textbook package with, online resources. One is 6th grade History Alive, the Ancient World, and the other one is 7th grade Eastern and Western World Geography. It was discussed at the February 5th curriculum meeting, and the only question raised was asking about the textbook and having seen it, and Ms. Roberka said it wasn't available yet, but they had looked at it on a digital format. At the February 26th meeting, at the board meeting, there was, and it was stated at the February curriculum meeting that it would move forward to the board meeting. At the February 26th meeting, I was asked by a board member, because the book hadn't arrived yet, that there were several people who still wanted to see the book. So I did not make a motion. The motion was on the agenda. I did not make a motion to approve it. We said we would wait until the next meeting. So at the March 26th meeting, the motion was on the agenda. And the book became available, I believe, was March 23rd. The book was available to board members who wanted to see it. There was a motion made to approve the book, and then there was a motion to table it because the person who made the motion didn't have a chance to look at the book yet and wanted to look at the book. So that motion to table it passed 6-3, so it was tabled to the next meeting, and we got to February 23rd, and that's when the motion was made, and it failed, I believe, 4-5. That was the first night that I heard any concern about the process for looking at the book. The question had always been, we need to see the book. And if you go back and look at the videos, that's what, there's never any mention of the process for choosing the book. Somebody asked about going forward. So at the last finance meeting, Mr. Dahlberg took out the $53,000 for the 2 books, but Dr. Yarnell, had asked to keep it in there, and 2 other board members who were the majority of the committee there asked to keep the money in the budget. So that money for the social studies proposal is still in the budget, but we will see the budget's going to be the proposed final budget will be voted on May 14th, and then the final budget will be voted on June 18th. We do have another curriculum meeting scheduled for June 11th. And we are hoping that the book will be on the agenda. The books, I'm not sure, Dr. Scheid is going to go back through the process and bring something to us. I don't know what that will be or what that will look like. So that is the hope, that there will be something on that agenda on June 11th. So is there anything you want to add to that, Dr. Scheid, as far as what might happen on June 11th, and then if the books are available for people to view, which I didn't know that they were available to the public?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Yardley. It is our intention to work with our social studies department under the direction of Mr. Roberka, and because process was the issue that was brought to the table, we will be using the official original textbook adoption process. What we did use the process for updating the version of the book that we had already adopted. So we will be going back. We will be going back as a social studies department, and we will follow that process. And it is our anticipation that we will be presenting options or recommendations actually at the June 11th meeting with copies of the book to make sure that everyone has a chance to see it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add?
Thank you, Mr. Roberka. I apologize too. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding, but I'm looking forward to moving past it.
I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Roberka, for your comments as well. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
May I speak? At the last board meeting, while you were still president, you said this was going to move forward to this curriculum meeting. I don't see it on the agenda. So is that because we're waiting for the new process, the new recommendations? Is that what?
Yeah, at that meeting, you know, there was some talk that we shouldn't be discussing it at the board meeting, so I said we would discuss it at the curriculum meeting.
Yes.
But I was, I guess I was told that there wasn't enough support to discuss it at this board meeting, and then the only other option would be if we went back and basically, I guess, started over, right? And then Dr. Scheid said she would be willing to do that, but that she wouldn't have everything done for this meeting, so it would have to be on the June meeting.
Okay, so the intention was to put it on this agenda, but then apparently there was a support of 5 board directors that said, we don't want this on the agenda, to move it to another. Is that the way it worked?
That's what I was told.
Okay. So as I understand it, we still don't know what is the problem with this book. We've heard that the 2007 book is a better book. The 2019 book is too defined, and that things are going to be changing in 4 years. They're the only comments that we as a board have heard about this book. We've heard no other, what is wrong with this book. We've heard the book, then we heard the process. So now we're back to, I'm not sure what we're back to. So how do we know, how will the board know what to approve and what is different between this book and any book that you're going to bring? I mean, how will you know what book to bring to the board? What version of what book if you don't know what is the concerns for the 2019 book?
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Our goal is to follow the textbook adoption process that's adopted by the Pennridge School District, and that is our intention. We will follow the process as we have for all initial adoptions. So there's certain criteria, there's rubrics, there's things that you look for, you obviously that you're looking for, and we will follow that process.
Okay, so this book will not be in the mix. This updated version of the current book will not be in any part of your recommendation. Is that correct?
We haven't come up, I can't answer that question in terms of a recommendation. We will be reviewing, we did review, we actually looked at 3 books, and we will continue to look at more than 1 book. Whether that one is still in the mix and isn't a recommendation, I mean, we don't know the answer to that yet. Because we're going to sit with options for both, for the 6th grade and the 7th grade. We're going to go through the full process, and then we're going to make a recommendation.
Okay. Well, my concerns still lie with this book and the comment that was made that history will change in 4 years, and honestly, every 4 years is a presidential election. So I'm assuming, since it has not been clearly articulated, that it's about surrounding our election process. And I understand I did get to look at the online version a little bit, and it ended with the Obama, the 2019 book ended with the Obama administration, and it touched on the election and the qualifications of the 2 candidates. Now, it has been said here in this room many times to our students that we are not the moral authority, but apparently we are the moral authority when it comes to teaching social studies, that we are not allowed to let our students interpret history from the fact presented in the book. So I do have concerns with this, and I wish you luck in getting a book in time, Mr. Ververka, for the next school year. So thank you for your efforts and your work.
My concern was not the exact date, but I had asked Dr. Scheid because I didn't get a chance to speak at the last meeting. I asked Dr. Scheid and Mr. Ververka. To me, it seemed like even though it is the 2019 text, I was surprised that it's already 2 years behind. I know that texts are going to be somewhat behind, so my question was, if that's typical, then that's typical. I just didn't think that it would be typical for it to be that far behind, and if it is typical, I just wanted to know how we were going to bridge that gap between what it provides and what it's sort of missing, or whatever, to bring it current. Things need to be current. I was a social studies teacher too, and I want to know how
I understand
that information is going to
it's
fit.
an 18-month catch-up.
Okay. So,
I heard that from a reliable source.
but that was my question.
So you're always going to be 18 months behind.
And if that's the standard. That was my question.
Thank you, Mrs. Yard.
Yep. All right, yeah, I don't know, I believe Well, yeah. Dr. Scheid sent an email out before asking if anybody had any concerns about the book, but only one person shared a concern. So, all right, we will move on to the agenda. The first item is class rank. Mr. Hillary Chaplicki and Mrs. Jennifer Pennebacker.
Good evening, and as stated on the agenda, we're here to talk about the class ranking system at the high school. It doesn't really affect the other grade levels, but it certainly affects the high school. And it's an issue that we've talked about a few times over the years, but we felt it was time to bring it back to the forefront and just address some issues within it. So I'll get started with basically the two parts that we're looking at here is, first of all, the way that Pennridge High School calculates class rank, in that it is not purely a GPA system. It actually also involves the amount of credits a student takes. And then the second part is the actual relevance of using class rank anymore, perhaps in a percentile or in some specific cases that maybe a college wants it for some reason or whatever the case might be. But in general, class rank is losing significance and relevance as we move on. We can show you some of that information as we move through. So class rank, just as a refresher, on slide 2, is a mathematical summary of a student's record. It takes into account the degree of difficulty. So if a student is taking AP courses and honors level courses and is successful, they would receive more point value than if they were taking an academic level course and succeeding as well. So it certainly encourages great performance. Kids have to work hard, and they have to do what they're supposed to do. And it also encourages students to reach up. And those are two things that we do not want to discourage at all. We want kids to keep reaching. We want kids to take high-level courses. We want kids to take a variety of high-level courses to kind of expand their thinking and what they want to do moving forward, and to entertain their interests and their curiosities in terms of their academic experience. The current class ranking system at Pennridge in some ways has caused a number of disadvantages to students. Years ago, when this system was put in place, many of these realities were not present. Things like the level of independent studies, our cyber courses, and just some other things that have come to the forefront in the past few years have shown that the way we currently do class rank is at least flawed in that it's not equitable for all of our students. And that's the goal here. We want to make sure that hard work and reaching high is rewarded. I'm on slide 3 now. I'm not going to read through every single one of those. You can certainly do that. But I do want to highlight a few things. When students are looking to take courses and to make decisions about what they want to do while they're here at Pennridge High School, especially students that find themselves near the top of the class, and it's a big class. We top out sometimes around 600, so you can imagine even 10% of those students is 60 students. They know that when they perform well and take high-level courses, they not only have to do that and succeed in those courses, but they also have to consider how many credits they are taking. So what this causes is a lot of wrangling and shuffling and strategizing and things like that, which I'm not saying are necessarily bad things, but I think in this instance, that's not what we want students focusing on. We don't want students learning how to game the system, so to speak, to gain more credits and take certain courses so that they can get more credits and perform well at high level. What we'd like to see is an equitable circumstance where if you take high-level courses, you work hard, you shoot for rigor and variety, that you'll be rewarded with a high GPA that's not hampered by the amount of credits you took. Sometimes that happens in terms of maybe students think, well, maybe I'd better take an independent study because that gives me another half credit or quarter credit or whatever it might be to gain credits. Or I think I should take this particular AP course because it's a little more credit than a regular AP course. And I really, having conversations with students over the year and having two that have gone through and one currently in the building, and obviously having taught a lot of these students and now supervising the teachers that teach a lot of these students, you hear a lot of stories. And some of them are concerning because as a teacher, as an educator, I want kids to focus on reaching high, not figuring out ways to navigate the system that maybe would be an advantage over other students. And obviously, people that have the savvy and parents and students that have the savvy to do this, at this point, in some ways, might gain the advantage. And I want to make sure that every student is standing on a level playing field. And the high school administration is in the same, is in the same thought process as that. Some other additional factors that don't even really figure into how many credits kids are consciously taking are students from the Upper Buck Technical School just awards credits differently. So a student will have more credits than if they took an academic program for all 4 years, just because of the way they organize credits. There's a lot of reasons for that. One being that they also serve 2 other high schools, so there's a lot of reasons why that credit system is different. Additionally, when students move into the district, they might come from a school that is on a different type of schedule, that requires more credits as part of graduation, and therefore comes in and presents a certain advantage in terms of class rank that puts them on a different level than other students. And again, my hope here is that you'll understand that we're trying to level the playing field. We want to make hard work and rigor the most important part here, not necessarily knowing how to select courses and take courses in a certain way. Additionally, we also want to make sure that students who are looking at taking advantage of things like dual enrollment, which is taking a course for college credit as well as high school credit, and doing an independent study, do so because of their love of that particular subject. I would hate to see a student, a child, because they're still children, saying, you know what, I don't want to take that because that won't give me as much credits as this, even though I love that. Maybe they're not going to take an English course, God forbid, and in favor of something else. So, the next slide, on slide 4, is actually just some simple examples. There are many examples, but I just wanted to give you a few for comparison's sake. The first thing we'll look at is comparing student A to student B in our current system. You'll notice that student A and student B took the same number of honors classes and AP classes, and that's quite a load if you know anything about honors and AP classes. And one is ranked 9th and one is ranked 12th, and you'll notice there's a credit difference, but you'll notice that even though the classes they took are the same, the credits are different, so therefore the student that has the higher GPA is actually ranked lower than the student that has more credits. So you can see that's kind of an example. And these students, because you can see their rank is respectively 9 and 12, and these are students from the past who have graduated. There's a bit of an inequity there. Student C and student D was meant to point out student C is a former tech student, and student D is another honors student who took honors classes, took a couple AP classes. The tech student took none. I'm sure they were very focused in their field of study at the tech school, but they didn't take any of the high-level courses here, which is fine. But just because of crediting and how we do that, and it figures into rank, that student was ranked higher than the student that was academically focused for 4 years. So that just kind of gives you an example of how that could happen. And this can also happen in other circumstances, such as move-ins and things like that. So just wanted to kind of draw that to your attention. It's very simple comparisons, and of course there's more examples out there. So overall, that's the way we do class rank and what we're trying to talk about regarding how we do it, but class rank has also declined in significance in that many high schools, and more than half of high schools, and this is from the College Board, no longer report class rank. They report GPA, they may report percentiles, and of course, as we'll talk about in a little bit, certainly for things like scholarships and things like that, sometimes you do have to report percentiles, and that's very important. But as you can imagine, the size of the school, there's a difference there in where you rank in terms of the significance of that. So that's not a level playing field in and of itself when our students are now competing with other schools, perhaps even around the world as they try to get into certain universities. In looking at the college admission process, and our guidance counselors are intimately involved with this, and looking at the research that's out there, and again, this is from College Board, does class rank figure into it? It does, but the percentile of how much it's a concern has dwindled, and we'll see that in a little bit. The biggest factors in making decisions is the strength of program, the high-level courses a student has taken, and obviously their grades and their success in those courses, standardized test scores, and so forth. So as you can imagine, those first two students we looked at in those examples were probably looked at very favorably by colleges because of the strength of their program, because of those AP courses, and the success in those honors courses as well. And again, this is just to reiterate the most significant factor in admission is challenging classes. And one interesting point to note, perhaps not even related to class rank, is that colleges care that students take high-level classes and challenge themselves, even if they don't have all A's. So I think that's important, especially for some of our students. For a student to take an AP course or an honors level course and be stretching to do so and get a B, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a hard climb for some of our kids, and I'd love to see them trying, and I'd love to see them feeling like they accomplished something because they reached a little higher. In our, not just in our county, but I guess in the tri-county area, or bi-county area, these are schools. I'm on slide 8. If you're not following along, you'll note that there are schools that are nearby, and schools that are in Montgomery County that do not use class rank. And as part of this process, we did reach out to some of them just to find out some of the ways they did things, but that's certainly not a conversation for this particular meeting. But there are schools around us who do not use class rank.
Good evening. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about admissions decisions. I'm one of the counselors at the high school, Jen Pennymacker, and this is something that I work with on a daily basis. I have all seniors this year, so this is my day in and day out. So this chart on page 9 shows the factor in admissions decisions. As you can see, class rank is listed there. So for considerable importance, it's listed at about 9.2%. So 9.2% of schools list it as considerable importance. What I think is really important on this slide is that limited importance and no importance are the majority. So most schools really don't look at class rank. I talk to a lot of admissions counselors, and I ask them, a lot of them take our transcripts and they will, review them and recalculate them. So they will take all of our transcripts and recalculate their own GPA, recalculate their own rank, and then rank their students based off of, the whole pile that they have from this area. So it's interesting to see that they really don't look at a lot of that kind of stuff. They just look at the classes that the student has taken, if they've challenged themselves, those types of things. So factors in admissions really change over time, and we'll see that on the next slide as well. Academic performance is consistently the top thing that schools look at. So again, they like to see that students are challenging themselves. We'll see on the next slide that class rank has really decreased over the past couple years, and that the top 4 admissions decisions for a lot of the private schools, public schools stay the same, so they constantly look at the same things. Private colleges tend to look at grades more so, college prep courses, strength of the curriculum. Public schools really look at like standardized test scores and overall GPA for students. Smaller institutions tend to place more of like a holistic approach to the student. So they may look at, you know, the essay or the writing sample, extracurricular activities. Not that other schools don't look at that, but they place a little more emphasis on that. And highly competitive schools tend to place more importance on the strength of curriculum, the essays, and that sort of thing. So on slide 11, you'll see that class rank over the past couple years, so the past 10 years, starting in 2006 all the way up to 2016, has decreased in importance over time. So it used to be considerably important to 23% of schools, and now it's only considerably important to 9% of schools. So if we look at some of the other ones, the starred green area up top, the grades in college prep courses, strength in curriculum, admissions tests, you can see that they typically stay consistent. So in 2006, the first one was about 76%, now it's 77%. So the only two on this list that have been declining over the years is class rank and interviews. So class rank is, again, consistently not being looked at by schools. So over the past couple of years, our guidance department was able to poll a bunch of the schools, so we listed a couple up there, and we were asking a bunch of different questions, just questions that we had, and also questions about class rank. So we asked them that, do you require class rank for admissions? And all of the schools listed there said no. Actually, none of the schools that we had spoken to said yes. And does it hurt a student if rank is not reported? All of the schools also said no. So just so you know, from a guidance standpoint, when we fill out the common application information or when we're submitting students' transcripts, there are areas that we can list the percentile reporting, or we can also calculate like a estimated rank for scholarships if need be, based off of GPA or other information.
So our recommendations moving forward, and these are actually very fluid, and I'll explain that as I go through a couple of them, is obviously eliminating class rank, and this would commence with the class of 2021. Although again, we could make a different decision there moving forward. We could report percentiles as needed to colleges who would require them, and certainly there are, as I said earlier, there are some scholarships that would ask for a percentile in some institutions, and we can certainly provide that, and if need be, we could calculate a rank if necessary, just to provide that information for a school, because of course we want to do anything we can do to help kids go where they want to go. It would involve updating a board policy. And another issue that we've discussed is how we recognize students, and we certainly want to keep those pieces, those vital importance in place. So whether it's a percentage dinner or how we recognize students at graduation, we'd still like to do that, and there are some great ideas out there about how to do that, and we've talked to neighboring schools, and many of them involve a laudate system or things like that, where you acknowledge those students at various levels of the summa and magna cum laude. But again, those are ideas. First, want to make the decision that we're not going to utilize the rank in the way we do now, and certainly stop calculating it in the instances when we have to, the way we do. And then from there, we would then make some decisions about how to properly acknowledge students. And our hope is that this would actually result in acknowledging the efforts of far more students, and yet still have them leveled so they could receive appropriate acknowledgement for their efforts in a more level playing field. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So you didn't actually say, but I'm assuming from what you're saying that so we wouldn't report any class rank. That's clear. But the way that you're saying in order to report the percentile, you're saying you would use GPA alone because that wasn't clearly stated.
Yeah, right. So there was two parts. It was stop calculating it the way we calculate it when we need to use it, but then overall it's stop using class rank.
Right, but then nobody would ever know their class rank except for their percentile.
Right.
Right. So it would never be reported to anyone.
Unless a college would say, look, we're trying to make a decision, we really need our an exact rank. Then we can make some calculations, figure it out.
It would be based off of GPA if we had to report a rank. But I've never seen an instance where that would need to happen. They would just want a percentage, yeah.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I think a lot of times, a point to make that wasn't made is that a lot of the students at the top or anywhere, that they're hundredths of a point of a difference. And they're very, very similar. And so it's, it becomes difficult to distinguish them and say which one's better. So, all right, any questions, other questions? Dr. Yarnell?
Some comments and a couple of questions. First of all, I think you're naive if you believe that students won't game the system no matter what you do. I can tell you from at least 2 iterations before this one that they gamed the system, right? They figured out how to get to at least the ones who are most motivated to get to the top of the heap. No different than the outside world, frankly. They will do whatever it takes to get there in many cases. And if that's take more AP courses, that's what they'll do. If that takes more credits, that's what they'll do. The reason the credits were added actually was because students learned that they could take a lot of AP courses and have a bunch of study halls and get a great GPA, or in this case, class rank. So, unfortunately it's not a perfect system, and I agree this is certainly not a perfect system that we have currently, and a lot of the things that you mentioned were not anticipated at the time. In 2006, I believe, is when this reform change was initiated. Something that I'm disappointed in is that, because I have mentioned this before, this comes up multiple times, is the concern that I have about the grade inflation at the high school. Mrs. Miller and I recently reviewed the applicants for the super seniors. And this year there happened to be more than 10% of the class. There were 55 applications. And it's quite an interesting process, and I can tell you from looking at those, the student who has currently got the class rank of 35th as of the end of his junior year, or her junior year, I don't know which it was, male or female, straight A student, high rank in terms of 35th, but that says to me that many of the students in the top 10% are straight A students, and that is a concern. I mean, not because they aren't good students, I know they are, but it's just, to me, that's more than it used to be, for sure, and that does concern me. I think that's something that will help. I also agree with Mrs. Yardley's comment about the differential. There were students that were 12 or 13 positions apart who differed by 1/1000th of a point in their calculated class rank. It's also clearly true that some students who take a lot of AP courses do well in this system. Obviously, they're weighted that way. And we had students in this list who took from no AP courses to 11 AP courses, and numbers of those who've taken 7 or 8. That's a big change from what it was 10 and certainly 20 years ago, when 4 AP courses might have been a very big deal at this high school. Now, some of that is we offer more. A lot of it is that we offer them at a younger age. People could take them in their sophomore and junior year, which I think is great that we do that. But some of it is just people, because of this metric that we're using, and because they think that will help them get into college. And from what you've said, it will help them to get into college, right? They're the high-level courses. They want to go to a competitive college, where they take, as long as they do well, and many of these do well. They get A's in that course. I don't know how the comparison is between the students who score 4 or 5 on their AP tests versus what they get in the class. I think that would be a very interesting thing to know. That's because I'm mathematically inclined, but other people will probably say, oh God, don't go there. But in any case, I think it's great that we're revisiting this issue. So I'm not sure whether it'll be a good or bad thing down the line, but if you don't try it, we won't know. So thank you for all the effort, for sure.
Other comments or questions? Mrs. Collins.
I'm still, so I appreciate the point about students choosing something they're interested in as opposed to wanting to get that extra. But I still don't understand, it seems like it's still not going to work to their advantage to choose something that doesn't have the higher weighting. Because the AP classes will still be higher weighted.
So I think what we're trying to kind of explain is that some students tend to choose AP courses that may have a higher credit value than other AP courses. So, for example, the way that rank is calculated for an AP science course that may be worth 1.25 credits, that student would get 6 points for an A, whereas a student who gets an A in an AP Lit course would get 4.8 points towards their rank index score.
So I didn't know that we assign different point values to our AP courses. How do you do that? How do you give one more points than another? I'm curious.
So it's a credit, sorry, my allergies.
Credits, whatever.
The credit value of the course. So some science courses have a lab period, so they meet for a longer amount of time. So they have a higher credit value for the course because they're in the class longer. So that would be why they have a higher
But
credit
it's
value.
not based on it's not a content thing, it's just a time.
The time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering also, is there any discussion about adding in, some schools have the pluses and minuses for the letter grades? Was there any discussion about that?
We've talked about that often in many circumstances, but just not as part of this discussion, but just as a matter of coincidence. In speaking with a couple principals and looking at other schools and how they acknowledge, many of them do use a plus or minus system.
Right. I'm just wondering too that also in a lot of the calculations on the quality of the high school, isn't that also taken into consideration, the grading scale? And if the grading scale is harder, the pluses and the minuses?
Yeah, so we provide what's called a school profile to every college that reviews transcripts. So each college will get that school profile and they'll be able to see our grading values. So they'll see that a 90 to 100 equals an A. And usually those admissions officers or counselors are specific to this area. So they're used to seeing applications from schools around this area. So then they'll be able to either take that transcript and recalculate their own GPA based off of the value that they give courses, or something like that, but at least they know what the number is for the grades that we're giving.
Yeah, I was talking about, no, it's true, so it could be that, right, they'll say this other school is more rigorous if an A is a 93 and an A minus is a 90 to a 92.
Right.
Yeah, so, but also I'm saying in those like national rankings in schools, the state rankings, I think they also look at that, what an A is, but that's outside of this. I mean, it's related, but it's aside. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
What is your thinking? You noted that from over the last decade or so, the value of the class rank has declined, the value of the interview has declined, and there's some other parameters there that have declined not to the same degree. But what has remained very important in colleges and universities seems to be the grade point average and the strength of the classes that they take and the standardized tests. My question is, and I've heard that this is perhaps the most competitive year that we've seen in many years, if not at all time. Colleges and universities are getting bombarded with applications. I know, for instance, Penn State gets more than 50,000 every year. If you have 50,000 applications to read, I don't know what sort of staff they have to do that, but I can imagine rating essays for 50,000 students is quite an undertaking, not to mention doing what you're saying, which is going back and recalculating things for some, but maybe not all students, and of course not doing it the same way for all the students because they come from different high schools. So I wonder if some of this isn't just, we just can't do more. We have so many applications, we have to make choices, and the easiest way to do it, of course, is if you have a GPA, if you know how many honors and AP courses they take, and what sort of SAT scores they have. Those are fairly straightforward metrics.
So that's why large schools like Penn State they don't have an essay, just because it would be way too much. But that's why they primarily just look at your SAT scores and the rigor of classes that you're taking. Yeah, and GPA is calculated different from high school to high school, so that's not even a standard thing. So it's not something that they could look at our school and be like, oh, well, he has or she has a 4.5 GPA here, and so does this CV student, so they're equal. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So yeah, they have a very daunting task.
In looking at all this information too, and just looking at what's out there in general in terms of research, and then, or at least in terms of the body of what's reported, and also in schools around us, there are so many different types of programs. There's scholars programs, and there's programs where certain schools attach themselves closely to a particular college, and they work together on the rigor of the courses. So there's so many different types of relationships out there. But to simplify the question of the interview, I would think that's just a human resource issue. I mean, how can you? Man, that's a day, huh? So I think it's just a human resource issue.
A lot of them use alumni for the interview.
Right, and they don't pay.
All right, so what is, oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
This is kind of off the topic of the class rank, but I noticed that demonstrated interest is still 14% of them are, schools are saying, which quality did you say this was most important or reasonable importance?
Considerably important.
Considerably important. So I just wondered if you take time with the students to explain to them what demonstrated interest is and making sure that they're hitting that, because that's a pretty high number compared to some of the others on the list. And I think if we could explain that to students, that might go a long way. And then the point about building relationships with these colleges, I think also would be helpful. So whatever you could do in that direction would be great. And the council recommendations, I'm surprised to see them. The council recommendations at 15%, and that's higher than the teacher recommendation, which I think a teacher recommendation in my mind is a little bit more personal, maybe more, it's not, I don't want to say more meaningful, but in my mind it would be maybe more detailed to the student than the council recommendation, but the council recommendation is also a really high number in the list, so I'm hoping that you have a lot of kids to write recommendations for, so however that can be improved.
Yeah, so with the council recommendations, colleges really want to see the progression of the student over time, which teachers can't really speak about because they've only had the student for that 1 year. And also, they want to hear about things that the student has done outside of the classroom, things that they really can't see from their application. So we try to hit on those points a lot, and I've written over 200 this year. So, we have different ways to get the information from students. That we meet with them, we have them fill things out. We definitely talk about demonstrated interest a lot. We tell them, if we have colleges coming to visit, like introduce yourself, be professional. Like a lot of them keep that information. So we definitely try to hit on all of this information for them. So it is a lot.
Thank you.
Sure. So are people okay with moving this forward? Dr. Scheid, we would need a motion?
Yes.
What would be the steps to go through with this recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Yardley. We would need a motion to move this forward to the board meeting because we would have to change policy.
Don't you have to read that policy 2 times? First and second reading?
So we would move it, we would actually vote saying that we want to go forward, is that what we would do? And then it would go to a policy meeting to change the policy.
That would be correct. We'd have to go to policy afterwards. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Well,
I was just saying the policy takes 2 public readings to change.
What do people think?
It's a whole new concept to me, but I guess I don't know how you get beyond, I can see some kids still saying, but what's my rank? What number am I? So I don't know. It's a new thing to me, but it seems to be the trend. So I feel like Dr. Yarnell, you can give it a shot. If it's true, all of those schools, I don't want it to hurt them. So that would be my only issue, if it's all of those schools that you mentioned are going in this direction and not asking for the